James Cartlidge, the Prime Minister says this morning that he wants to get to negotiations over Ukraine through peace through strength, which is an old Reaganite slogan. Are you down with that?
Well, I mean, you know, I think that the cornerstone of our defence policy and the cornerstone of NATO has been deterrence, which is if you want to deter war from happening, you have to be ready for it. You have to be strong. That's been our position for a long time. I think the issue here is that the amount we need to spend to deliver that strength to ensure peace is going to go up. And the reason for that is twofold. It was already the case, as you know, Trevor, that we had given a lot of munitions to Ukraine, rightly, to help them stay in the fight, to defend their country. And since then, with America's clear lead, which had been going on before Trump, of wanting to focus more on China, we are going to have to do more heavy lifting in NATO, and that means us and our allies spending more.
Oh, that's interesting. So you accept that essentially that America has other priorities and we're going to have to fill in. We're going to have to backfill.
Just to be clear, of course, these are all linked, right? These issues are linked. I mean, if I was going to say one thing that I hope the Prime Minister would stress to the President when he sees him, it is my fear that if Russia is in any way seen to win from a settlement, should there be one, that will send a terrible signal to other adversaries like China. So we do need to see these are linked. But clearly, and as I say, it actually predates President Trump, they will be focusing more on China. They see that as their peer threat in the Pacific, whereas we will have to do more to face the Russian threat.
So if I can understand this properly, what you're saying is you think that Trump is in danger of allowing the Russians to claim a victory. Was that your reaction when you heard him say that the Ukrainians had started the war?
Well, look, I mean, I obviously don't accept that point. Where I strongly agree with what President Trump has said is this point about the need for higher defence spending, is the need for us to step up in Europe. There are NATO European countries, as you know, who don't even spend the current 2%, so they need to do that. And so I can imagine that is very frustrating in the US administration, and Trump has his way of showing that frustration.
Interestingly, by the way, when I talked to the Cabinet Minister, Trevor Phillips, this morning, I couldn't get her, and no other Cabinet Minister has done this, to admit or to say that Donald Trump was wrong to say Zelensky's a dictator. Donald Trump was wrong to imply that Ukraine has started the war. Are you willing to say that Donald Trump was wrong?
I'm absolutely. I've said it already. I've said it previously. He is not. Zelensky is not a dictator. He is the democratically elected leader of a free and sovereign democracy that was invaded.
It's funny.
Was invaded by a dictator.
Yeah, but it's quite striking. No politician can say the words "Donald Trump is wrong."
He was wrong to say that Zelensky is a dictator.
Well done.
There you go.
Hurrah!
But it's a factual observation, and you know, I think. Trevor, if I may say in this, what you get in this sort of issue is you get a lot of noise and somehow you've got to focus on the actions and what you need to do.
I agree. Anyway, your leader's written a letter to the Prime Minister today demanding an immediate rise in defence spending to 2.5%. OK, everybody agrees with that. But let's just be clear here. When you were in office, you argued for this, that the target should be 2030, because you said, actually, it had to be 2030 because you couldn't build tanks and weapon systems instantaneously. They need time. The Institute for Government pointed out that your target would require some dramatic cuts elsewhere, specifically the sacking of 70,000 civil servants. I noticed that in Kemi Badenoch's letter, she says we want 2.5% immediately. She doesn't mention that price of that is going to be sacking 70,000 people.
I'm happy to correct you, if I may. So, having been in the MOD as Defence Procurement Minister, when we came up with those numbers, I was intricately involved. Our plan was to get to 2.5% by 2030. You're absolutely right. But the key thing about it is, and, you know, having been a procurement minister, I have to emphasise this. If tomorrow you place an order for Storm Shadow missiles, they don't arrive the next day, they'll take around 3 years. So for the MOD to place those orders, which are essential because of what we've given to Ukraine, they need to know where they stand over a multi-year period. We gave them that confidence. We were going to reduce the size of the civil service back to pre-pandemic sizes, not particularly ambitious, Trevor, if I may say, and use that money to fund an urgent increase.
70,000 civil servants out of 500,000. That's positively Elon Musk-esque, isn't it?
Well, I say back to pre-pandemic levels. Do we still have a pandemic? Do we still need that size of a civil service? Or to put it another way, should we be maintaining a large civil service or switching that money to a stronger armed forces? I think we all know what we need at the moment.
So the Conservative policy is to reduce the civil service by that sort of size?
It's two things. It was to reduce civil service and get to 2.5%. But what we've said today, Trevor, is given what's happened since and in recent days, the clear indication we need to do more, we think we need to go further and faster, in fact, than 2.5%. It's just a statement of the reality we face.
All right, well, let's go back to the White House. Your party's been in line, and you've sort of said it this morning, you want to stay in lockstep with the United States. But Boris Johnson wrote that this weekend, it's bonkers to say that Ukraine started the war, described Mr. Trump's claim as balls. He seems to think that what Mr. Trump is doing is a cunning wheeze to get the Europeans to stump up more money. Is this sort of language that Conservatives ought to be using about our great ally?
Well, I'm sure you're aware that it's impossible to speak for Boris Johnson. He has his own way of putting things, let's say, just like, dare I say, Donald Trump does. As I said to you earlier in the interview, you have to cut through the noise and focus on what really matters here. And if I may, there is a serious point, and I feel very strongly on this. I've worn this badge, the UK-Ukraine badge, pretty much every day since the invasion started 3 years ago. And at the back of my mind is always this simple point, that as we talk, people are being bombed in that country. It's a European nation invaded by an aggressive dictatorship. We have to stand by them. So I think it is time to focus on the actions. At home, that means higher defence spending, and urgently, and internationally, and we do stand by the Prime Minister. We want to see him going to President Trump and emphasising how it's in all of our interests to stand up to Putin.
But in a way, this is my point. It is serious.
Yeah.
And the former Prime Minister, the former leader of your party, a person known to Donald Trump whose word will be noticed, uses this kind of language. Shouldn't you be coming on this morning and saying, I think, Boris, you ought to pipe down because you're getting in the way?
I think it's better for me to speak as the Shadow Defence Secretary and talk about our policy. And we've set out a very important change.
But nobody's
in policy.
hearing your policy when he's got his megaphone out.
Well, actually, it's had quite a lot of coverage, if I may say, in today's newspapers, which you were reviewing earlier. And there is an important part of it, if I may, Trevor, which is you talk about being serious. I think if, because I was in the Treasury as well as at the MOD, if you are serious about defence spending, and everyone agrees it needs to go up, you have to say where the money's going to come from. I know that's an old-fashioned idea. So something that Kemi wrote in her letter, she said, we all support the government if they take difficult decisions to increase defence spending, and they're going to have to. You can't borrow it. Borrowing's too high already. You can't tax anymore. Taxes are going through the roof. There will have to be difficult decisions, and we think the aid budget will have to be under consideration, but also welfare and, frankly, scrapping this crazy Chagos deal.
So more defence and question the aid budget, really, rather as Mr. Trump has done in the United States?
Not for that reason. I mean, we make our decisions according to the national interest of the United Kingdom, obviously. But looking at the situation, the aid budget, which does many good things around the world, and which we are proud of, it is there to keep us more secure, because the underpinning logic is that you spend money on countries abroad to help them develop so that in the long run, the world is more stable and safer. But unfortunately, the reality, and it's a stark reality, I'm afraid, is that we need more hard power now rather than soft power. And so we will have to consider looking at least in the short term.
James Cartlidge, thank you very much for your time this morning.
Thank you.